to Nonprofit Lowdown. I'm your host, Rhea Wong. Hey, podcast listeners, welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Lowdown. Today's episode is a little bit different than the usual. It actually is a live conversation that I was facilitating with three incredible women, Erica Hamilton, Alison Overseth, and Gisele Castro. In this conversation, we share the ups, the downs, and the pains of being an executive director and running a nonprofit. I think you'll really enjoy this conversation, as did I. And stick around afterwards and you can participate in the activity that we do. So let me know what you think. Thank you all of you for being here. I'm Rhea Wong. My life ambition is to be Asian Oprah, so making it a reality. I'm delighted to interview my friends, my colleagues, my sisters in arms, Erica Hamilton, Gisele Castro, and Alison Overseth. I did have a beautiful intro, but I don't have Wi-Fi, so y'all are going to have to introduce yourselves. I know. But if you don't know, you gotta know. So let's start with you, Erica.
I'm Erica Hamilton. I am CEO and founder of a small strategic advisory firm called The Memo I Never Got. You can take from that title what you need to. My background and sort of motivation for starting that firm was to basically take the wisdom, the trauma, the experience, the insight that I gained working across sectors and in a variety of positions, including being the ED of City of New York for a number of years, but to take that and to really try to apply it to working with leaders who hold identities that I deeply care about, and I would work with for free if money was no object and I had no bills, right? And so I've been doing The Memo I Never Got for the last few years. Native New Yorker, live in Brooklyn with 2 children, about to be an empty nester, so empty nesters in the audience looking for advice.
Wait, did you found an interesting group of women who get together regularly? Founder of the Women's Leadership Group.
It's a pleasure. As soon as I walked in, I was like, wow, this is powerful. I could feel the strong energy. I am Gisele Castro, the Executive Director of Exalt. We work with young people who are court system involved, ages 15 through 19. I've scaled the organization successfully during political climate, during economic downfall, during the biggest challenges, and we have done extraordinarily well. And we're about to launch a new strategic plan, and it's exciting to be here this afternoon. And over to you, Alison.
Gisele. So I am Alison Overseth, the CEO of the Partnership for After School Education, which I've done most of my adult life. So 13 and a half years as CEO, 12 years before that as chair of the board. And we actually stay relatively the same size. So it's a different kind of model. So we say nimble and we're small. We have 13 full-time staff, $2.5 million budget, but with a large footprint. So we work with 1,600 community-based organizations throughout the city to improve opportunities for kids living in poverty. Work happily with many of you closely. And I've been part of the Women's Leadership Council for 5 years, 6 years. Anyway, and it's the best thing ever. And you have all given me such good advice along the way. So anyway, it's a delight to be here and to see everybody.
We were thinking about how we wanted to structure it. We have 50 minutes. We could talk about a lot of things, but there are 2 things that we really wanted to come out of today's conversation. 1, how to survive and thrive in this hard-ass job. 2, sharing hard-won wisdom, and each of these ladies have individual and unique experiences. So I'm just going to start off with a fun one, which, and this is for all of you, my best friends know blank about me that not a lot of people do.
I am a total crier. Anything. And actually, bizarrely, not always it's sad things, it's like the happy things, but I weep and get choked up really a lot.
That's okay. There's room for emotion here. Gisele, what about you?
I'm going to say that my very good friends know that I have a really good sense of humor. And I'm always so serious, so this is why it's a big deal.
I'm going to go with really good friends know that I am a creature of habit. I crave the joy of things that are familiar, and so I always get clowned when we go out for what do you order, what do you drink. It's always the same thing.
You know what?
Red pop.
Too many decisions to make in life. Okay, I'm gonna start. This is a spicy question. So Erica talks a lot about your North Star. What do you mean by a North Star, and how do you use it to both guide your decisions and to check in along the way? Because sometimes we can lose our way.
This construct I often talk about when I'm working with CEOs or EDs, or even when I was sitting in that seat, especially in these roles. I think one thing that we often don't take the time to do as leaders is to really, before we dive headfirst into the deep end of the work, is to step back and really take a minute to think about what is the North Star, what is the actual legacy I'm trying to achieve by involving myself in whatever it is I'm about to involve myself in. Whether I'm running the thing, whether I'm sitting on the board of the thing, what is it that is motivating me to invest time and energy in terms of what I want to achieve? Why I think leadership of this thing is important and for me to own it. And I think it's really important to define that for yourself and then dive into the pool, because it'll give you a North Star to keep you grounded when everyone else around you, including the 12-year-olds that work for many of you, want to tell you why what you're doing is wrong, why all those decades of experience that you have are no longer relevant. And so it just gives you something to really ground onto, and then creating space to check in with yourself, because that legacy definition will change over time as you learn more, as you evolve, as you grow. But always centering that, because it will just give you that space and that thing for you to stay centered on, no matter the chaos that's going on around you may create in terms of imposter syndrome or the doubts that will creep in. This thing will give you an anchor to hold on to in those times of hardship.
Some of us are thinking about succession planning and legacy. So how does the North Star connect to this idea of legacy?
Yeah. The one thing I would say, I think especially sitting in this job and especially holding the identity of woman, we tend to want to do too much. We tend to want to do all the things. Everything we see that's broken on the landscape, we think is our job to fix it. And there's something about doing this activity to define legacy that will also hopefully compel you to clarify priorities. And the hardest thing you have to really realize is everything that's broken is not mine to fix. I've got to really... I need to be in this room all day. But it'll help you, and hopefully you have someone, you have this circle, or you have a person that you can go to help you really commit and align. But it'll help you, again, figure out what is the work you need to be doing, investing time in, so that you are not burning yourself down, grinding yourself out, leaving nothing for anybody around you to get that needs from you in your personal life, and also leaving nothing for yourself to pull from.
You said a mouthful. All right, let's talk about work-life balance for a second. Allison, this is for you. Can you walk us through, as someone who's been at your organization for a long time, forever, I feel like 1 year equals 7. How do you maintain and balance your peace and well-being while being this very demanding job? And I think you mentioned something about seasonal and understanding the generation that you're in.
I actually don't think there's work-life balance. I think there's work and there's life, and you do one at one time. So it's finding that tapestry, I guess, that works for us in our different ways. I have to say I'm amused, because I'm married a board member, right? So we actually do the work together. We do the personal stuff together. And we are an expensive couple to go out to dinner with near my benefit, I'm just saying. But seriously, a lot of the people I care about most, many of whom are in this room, but others in my life, very much care about what I do at work. If you actually, at some level, don't care about other people's kids, it's less likely we have things in common. And that's both personal and professional. Some of those things overlap in different sorts of ways that I find really fascinating and good and helpful. What we were talking about generationally is, so I'm 64, my baby is now 27, that's freaking me out. And I'm a second marriage, a good marriage, so we can talk about the experience of the bad marriage, because I couldn't have done the things I'm doing now with that person, and I can do different things now. And so all those things. But I also know, because a number of us are in really different places. And like I looked with the young women who were on my team who had young kids at home during COVID. There's less things you can take on. I've had 2 of our staff have been going through the IEP process with their kids with special needs. It's really complicated, and I think that we often don't give ourselves enough grace to just say where we are in life and to recognize that these are not nice to have, these are critical to who we are, but recognizing that there are different times and different places for what you can do and what you might want to do, depending on everything else that's going on. I remember being in a job that was really 9 to 5 when my mother was dying, and that was really important to me. I was able to spend time with her because it was not that all-consuming sense of things, and I think we don't talk enough about that. We know women take on disproportionate amounts of the personal care anyway, but I think that in fact I'm delighted right now, there's a woman who is working with us when I first started at Pace, and our son was 8, and she's got no interest in being an executive director. I'm good at this, but I never want to be an executive director. Now he's in high school, and she's looking at executive director jobs. And now's her time for that. But it wasn't before. Yeah. And so I think as we imagine our capacity to do things, both personally and professionally, we have to think about that. And there are a lot of systems that could be a whole lot better in terms of childcare and everything else that could support us. But it's also pretty personal, right? And if there's a special something going on in life, I think we have to appreciate that. And I will also just say, it's really nice to have love in your life. It's like really nice to have relationships you care about. And it's really nice to spend the time that needs to be there for that. And that's important. And then I'll just finish with my other work-life balance. It's coming from a retreat we had some time ago. I will say, hot double bath every single night. I just need that time. I just need that.
Miss Gisele, this is a two-parter for you.
Hey, go for it.
For those of you who don't know, Exalt has been on a rocket ship. So I think Gisele, when you started, it was like under 500K, and then it's what, 6 million now?
8.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to us about, as a leader of a, I don't even want to say fast-growing, just like exponentially growing organization. What mental shifts and practices have you had to make internally to be able to lead this organization?
I love this question so much, and thank you, because I live it and I breathe it. And it starts with the why, like knowing why do you want to take on a massive challenge. And for me, it's the juvenile criminal justice system in New York and abroad. My story is that I wanted to become a journalist. I believed that I was going to travel the world and be on media with you. But then my older brother was impacted by the system, and he got out of it. And this is how I met Alison, when I decided, let me go back and rethink my career, and went to Bank Street. And my nephew was in Florida arrested and sentenced to 10 years of prison, and he was 18. At that point in time, I understood with absolute, utter clarity, I must do everything possible to dismantle this system. And what that is to me is that the US is still #1 in mass incarceration, and that to think very clearly about system change, it means moving so many people forward. So then there goes the story of creating a design, a concept, which is an ideology, it's a framework, and then really thinking about all the people that will be invested. And it starts with your staff, it's also looking at the governing body, it is all the people who will play a role in philanthropy, it is the internship sectors, and then it is understanding systems. And for us, one of the biggest systems was creating a court advocacy model where we had first the DAs in Manhattan, in Queens, and in Brooklyn reduced sentencing, and these were serious felony offenses. When I get to see the data points in so many ways, that is in dollars and cents, from it was a $900,000 budget with a $400,000 deficit, what that said to me was that a lot of people will quickly say no to our young people. And what I understood was that I was always so proximate to the issue. And when we understand these big questions of life, it is at a certain point, it is at what fuels purpose. And I think that a lot of times we are always thinking about what drives us, and then at the core, what are we so afraid of? What are we deeply afraid of? What I was afraid of, Ria, was I believed that I would fail until I understood wholeheartedly the system, society, America has failed so many people. So it was my perspective that I said I will not participate and I will not perpetuate a cycle. I will think very clearly how I would move something forward. So then, when I understood that I would get a lot of no's, I saw it as an opportunity to convert people, for people to really understand that at this moment in time, the climate has not changed for any one of us. So I would say that then the levers that I pull are the court system, the education system, philanthropy, the young people themselves, and more specifically is myself. And I'm going to close out with this one. At night, I have to close my eyes. I put my oils, the doTERRA lavender council on my chest, and I just sit in my lovely bed that I barely get to enjoy, and I pop my pillows, and I understand that I have to breathe from deep inside what I call my chakra, my deep level, and always ask myself this massive question: how am I today? What has scared me? And when I wake up, how am I going to do this again? And that is the most intimate conversation that you have with yourself when you understand that you're driving change. I understood this other thing. I did say I was going to stop it, and here I am. Because I'm going to be 50 in 3 weeks. And it's like, whoop. And I understood a lot, that you pay a price, right? That you pay a price. While I was leading the organization, I had 5 surgeries. And I also understood what happened at my last surgery when I was going to the OR. When I was being rushed in and I said, today was my last day, it would have been enough. Mm-hmm. And at that point, that is when I began to understand, I am glad that I took on such a concept that is difficult. And I think that is what it is. When you understand who you are and what fuels you and what scares you, really, truly frightens you, go ahead and confront it, because it's only you that you're dealing with to move people forward.
You spoke about levers.
Yes.
One of the levers being staff. This question is for Ms. Erica. Let's talk about the babies who work for us. The Gen Zs, the millennials. I have feelings about that, but they are more vocal than ever. For the Gen Z, this is the first generation that's entering the workforce without having had a job before entering the workforce. So, question for you: what bright spots do you see, and what challenges do you see? I try to start optimistic. There are lots of challenges.
Yeah, I think, and I'll channel it through my experience and the experience of leaders I work with now. On the bright spots, it's interesting. There are quite a few folks I'm working with now who are going through this moment of having to rethink their organization structure because of some fiscal pressure, right? And the client recently had a meeting, and it was energetic, I'll say that, on Zoom. And one thing I said to the client when we finished, I said, I first want to take a minute to be grateful for some of the blessings of that meeting. And they were like, what? Right? Seriously, in the Zoom. And I said to them, listen, the first thing I'll say to you is, which is to your question, people were engaged. Like, the people were asking questions, really trying to understand the why behind things. They weren't necessarily throwing up, we could do it better, but there was a lot of curiosity and inquisition. And I said, when you're going through these moments, one thing that you never want to see is silence or disengagement. And so to that end, I will say, especially in this moment, I am seeing a lot of hope in terms of these groups of people are trying to channel their energy into trying to figure out how to be a part of the solution. And part of what we need to do on the leadership side is figure out constructive ways that we can create for them to distribute some of that energy. And also, quite frankly, for them to get a little bit more visibility into the complexity of the situations that we're dealing with. Everything isn't just you didn't think of this moment from a younger person to an older leader. And so I will say, I still see that energy, I see that enthusiasm. I think trying to figure out as leaders, how can we continue to try to pivot it into being used in constructive ways? I think also thinking about how do we disabuse folks in that generation from what I think is this lens that they walk into many situations with, thinking I could do that better, with no basis, no like data or experiential basis to say that. And so how do we create pilots or spaces where they can feel heard, right? But we can also help educate them on, this is the full detail of a situation that we might not have exposed to the whole staff, but we're going to share with this committee for them to understand, and we want your input. The times where I've seen that happen, I have seen a lot of instances where you will inevitably get those generations of people to realize, oh, this is harder than I thought. And not that the world of work should be about teaching them, but to the point you just raised with that stat, as leaders, when you're bringing these generations in, like, unfortunately, the work does become about teaching them more about how to lead, how to show up. My favorite thing to talk with leaders about is really teaching staff about the moments in leadership when there will be no winning solution. Like literally, I have a menu of shit to pick from. A is dark colored, B is tan. Like, sorry if anybody's like not a profanity person. But disabusing, again, these generations of thinking, there's a winning solution and you just didn't know how to get to it. Sometimes there isn't a solution that's going to create a win for everybody. And so we have to pick the least traumatic option, and it means somebody's going to lose. So just how are we creating those constructs for them? How are we taking the one person or the two people you might find in your organization who are part of those generations who are phenomenal? I don't know if you ever come across these people where you're like, oh my God, how do you think this way? Why do you think this way? It's so different than your generation. And how do we engage them in the process of speaking to their people and helping to translate so that it is not just us talking heads trying to convince these generations how to think differently, or the way that the way they operate needs to change. So not doing it alone is the other thing. Like, how do we enlist them in the cause in a way that's productive?
I'm going to ask about the board. It can be complicated, right? They can be a sail or they can be an anchor. Alison, I'm going to start with you because you not only lead the European board, but you also lead the Smith College board. So that's a very high caliber, high octane group. Anything that you feel like you can share as far as hard-won tips on recruiting, managing, and changing a board?
We could spend hours on this, but I think when starting at the beginning is the best chance to have a functional relationship and a healthy relationship on a board starts before they're board members. So it really is being clear for everybody on why this person, what you need. I'm the CEO, you are a board member, you are important, but so am I, and we have very different roles. If we're successful, you are doing what you do really well, and I'm doing what I do really well, and a lot of that is going to be mutually supportive to have good things happen for kids in New York City in this case. And I think that those earliest relationships cannot be underestimated. At PACE, we have never had a give or get nor term limits. And one, because from the get-go, wanted to be able to have economic diversity on the board. And managing the board, I think, is really important. I've had chairs who are really good at doing that and chairs who are less good at doing that, and then it falls to me, which is just annoying. But managing the board, it's got to happen. Every year, even if your term's not up, you should expect to hear from someone on the board if you haven't attended many meetings, or if you have not gone to a program, or if you have not brought friends to the benefit. Just holding those standards in place on a regular basis. I think that we all know this, I'm not saying anything magical here, but staying on it matters, because then it can be really functional. And what you're talking about with the younger people on our teams, if we can lift up the board members who really get this and do it well and try and move them to leadership positions, then you're modeling the behavior as opposed to yelling at the people who aren't getting it done. I have found time and again that if we've got that modeled behavior, everyone else rises to it. And I love occasionally we're bringing 2 new board members right now. And they're both coming from very different perspectives, very excited, but I can see already some of the past board members are raising their game because they're seeing it and they're watching it. I say this both as the chair of the board at Smith and CEO at PACE. We think of our boards as this big, annoying, time-consuming thing, and I just can't say it's enough. We have to have individual relationships with each and every one of them, and it just makes such a difference. Best when we could do it in person, but even if it's over Zoom, where I'm like literally looking you in the eye saying, you're going to chair that committee, this is how we're going to stay in touch, this is what I hope, give me feedback when you need something. Those things, we create a contract with each person in that own set of ways, and that you set the expectations high of what you need. And as the final thing I'll say, in both roles, I just really encourage feedback. So when somebody does, because in all of our roles we can be intimidating, I think, but really say, no, if you tell me, I'm listening to you, I'm going to do it differently next time, and you do, well, you just build that trust of your leadership in either position, but also that you have a relationship with them that is mutually respectful, that you've actually listened, and that you're going to make change when you think change makes sense. And so all of those pieces come together. We can talk about firing board members if you want to, because I've had that experience too.
One thing, you said many things, but I just really want to lift up, whether we're talking about funders or staff members or board members, it's important to water the flowers, not the weeds.
Yes.
100%.
And with so much time trying to water the weeds and hoping not to turn into flowers. Maybe
Yeah.
they'll never turn into flowers.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
One of the things that has to go with both staff and board and all of these different relationships we've had, and I've struggled with a number of different things as we all have through the years. And my husband finally put it perfectly one night. He finally just said, "You're expecting things of people they're not capable of doing. Some things need to be broken, they can stay broken. We can't do that." And there are times where that really resonates with me. And we find that on staff. You're like, "But you could do this, but they can't."
Gisele, I know you're in the middle of revamping your board right now.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about what is happening for you, any lessons learned.
I would say that it is part of a strategy. It's a long-term relationship. They are assessing you as the leader, your work, your project, your success. Because when I started to think about diversifying my board, these are people who I envision that they will then set the course when the organization is in 2030, and also are the ones who are going to be responsible for a succession plan. And also they're the people who they represent for us. We just brought in Dr. Lisette Nieves. We brought in, the commissioner from the Department of Probation, former Anna Bermudez. We brought in a senior person from Deloitte, and we brought in so many other great thinkers. And I had to sit down with my coach, and I did this work, which was, what is this new profile of group of people? Anticipating what could be potential wins and also challenges. Because the wins of the core board is not the wins of this current board. These are board members that they know how to handle a lot of challenges. And a lot of the work has been making sure that they could really identify and define their why. I'm going to close out with this one because I think that this was the unifier. Within our organization, when we onboard people, they have a few readings. Michelle Alexander, The New Jim Crow, Paulo Freire, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, right? Brian Stevenson, Just Mercy. And whether someone has read it or not, but it's grounding everyone. But then more importantly, keeping them at a high level on what is governance, policies, fundraising, fiduciary responsibility, and then very quickly giving them a win. The person who leads Deloitte, she will be with 20 of her staff on Friday in the organization, launching a volunteer program. Then the next one, on Wednesday, we have our gala, we'll be standing up on stage, making the final fundraising appeal. So it is raising the standard and giving them a win that is visible. The other thing is that I started to diversify the board in terms of race. The first process was a challenge. The board was not ready. The second one, I think that the board is ready, but I think that at this point there's going to be massive changes. I guess that is something that I am anticipating, that when we're thinking about systems design change, what are some of the great opportunities that we will get to see that hopefully we can model and share our lessons learned. A lot of them good, and then a lot of them big challenges.
Yeah. You have a coach, and I think we all need to recognize that people need coaches. You're not just born knowing how to be an ED. We wouldn't ask Serena Williams to step onto a tennis court without a coach. So I think that's one thing that we should really be advocating for. I want to talk about changing the culture of boards. And Erica, do you want this question, particularly as it pertains to DEI? Because I think obviously post-pandemic, post-George Floyd, post-BLM, all of these boards, which were very white, were sitting there being like, oh, we have to do a thing now. We care about DEI now. And so I think there was a big rush to train people in DEI all of a sudden. I don't know how effective those efforts have been. So how do you think about leading a board through real change as it pertains to DEI issues and how it's a verb, not a checkbox?
I think one of the most important things to start with is the CEO can't be the person leading all that work on their back. They can't do it for the staff and the board and the funders. It's like ridiculous. The first step, I think, is even ascertaining where is this board in terms of their ability to have someone on it also step up, to lead it, to guide it, to be spokesperson in terms of belief and commitment, which is what a lot of organizations have tried to do and are still trying to do. I think it's impossible to go from we've done nothing, like the board has never even uttered this topic except when the staff brings it into the room, from that to now we're gonna be like hella woke and on board, we're allies. Now we're all allies. And so I do think first, and this is back to the CEO really being honest about where they are, where the board is. I think it's starting to work with the board, like having a conversation about the journey the board is gonna need to go on. And if the board is not in a place where they're able to do it, I think also recognizing that part of the work that needs to be done is helping to recruit more people into that board so that the CEO isn't carrying it alone. And then I think it is about bringing in, because I have not really ever seen this done successfully unless you have a sitting people and equity officer on your team. I think it's then hiring the help that you need to facilitate these conversations. One of the things that makes me so sad when I hear it is when I will have a CEO of color come to me and tell me that the expectation they've got from the board is that they're now going to lead DEI work, and I'm just like, what is happening? And that means creating a budget for that work, like investing in it to the degree that you need to. It means also doing real diligence to hire people who are trained and experienced, not just who say they are and hold certain identities, because that's a disaster to do cleanup on aisle 5 after it's done. And I also think something that's powerful that enough boards don't take advantage of, and CEOs, is use the network to figure out whose board has done this or is doing it. Can I lean on you and maybe bring you, CEO, in and your board chair to come and talk to my board about examples of how this can be done? I think boards often hear best from other board members, as stupid as that is. And it's exhausting as a CEO, especially of a nonprofit, if you don't have somebody on your board who can speak to the board and you have to do that work, you're carrying the wrong weight. That's not the work you should be doing. And the window's closing. As with all things, I think we have these flashpoint moments. And then the way I think about it is literally it's like somebody just started a stopwatch. And it's like, everybody better engage on this topic as quickly as they can, get all the funding you can, because with every minute that passes, this is what's happening. It's like the Mission Impossible dynamite fuse, and it's gonna shut and be done. And so it feels like we're in that moment, especially as we head into the election and all the foolishness that's about to start.
Let's talk about fundraising, my favorite topic. As we know, obviously having relationships with funders is a key part of your job. I would say probably the most important part of your job. I think we could go down the list of the million ways in which we've had dysfunctional relationships with funders, but let's keep it positive. And we'll start with Alison, actually this will be for all three of you. Can you walk us through a story about a funder that felt like a true partnership?
It's about relationships, and that comes first, but I think that's true in fundraising, individuals and institutions, right? It's, do we see eye to eye? Do we have things we care about that are the same? Do we have something we can work on together, formally or informally? I feel it that way on a lot of levels. I have to say, because after we were talking the other day about this, Rhea, we don't have any funders anymore who are in the kiss the ring area. It's like, life is just too short. I'm really willing to work hard on our mission and make sure that all the things are happening, but the sucking up thing, I just don't have time for. And now I haven't been in the position where somebody's saying, here's $4 billion, and if you suck up, you could get it, because that might be different. But part of what I'm really taken with, and I have to say, I think of billions. It's expensive. But what I'm taken with is that what the real cost of raising money is, and in part because we now are funded by Robert Sterling Clark. I don't know if any of you are. Phil Lee, awesome, trust-based philanthropy. And what it means is that my proposal to him is making a copy of a proposal I gave to another funder. And my report to him is an hour-and-a-half conversation where we just chat, which is basically free consulting for us. Smart, capable, supports us in a zillion different ways. But when I literally think about the economics of that, let's say it's $50,000 grant, is worth a $75,000 or $80,000 grant from anybody else. It's like all the paperwork, all the annoyance, all the worry, all the concern, all the planning, all the things. And so when I say that I have less of these funders that require a ton of that, because that money is very expensive to get. If you're having to spend all that time making them feel better about themselves, it's expensive to us. And I remember when I first got to PACE, we had a couple of $5,000 grant makers. I'm like, we're spending $10,000 to get $5,000? We're not applying for those anymore. We're done with that. And anyway, so it really is a cost issue. But there are real partners out there, and they're introducing you to other people. They're putting a good word when you're not in the room to other funders. They are creatively saying, oh my God, have you met these people? You guys could have a fun partnership. Not telling you have to, but introducing you to people and resources and thoughts. And that's really powerful. And then we're doing the work together.
And something you mentioned about costs, it's not just the cost of what it takes to administer the grant, but the emotional cost.
Oh, it's just exhausting.
exhausting.
They make you feel crappy about yourself. There's a lot of reasons I should feel crappy about myself, but not because some funder thinks I should feel crappy about myself.
If there are any funders that make you feel like your soul's getting sucked out of your eyeballs,
They gotta go away.
say
You
goodbye.
gotta say goodbye. I think that, now that I think I know because I lived it, I have said no to funders because the work itself is that difficult and that challenging. And it is a relationship, and I agree with you that it is call it trust philanthropy. And I remember with one funder that started off with us at $75,000 a year. It took a while, but this person had to travel, sit with me, have lunch, observe a class, go into a courtroom, go into the school. But they were really learning, and that's when I knew it's like, this is a good partner. This is someone who was going back and thinking through who are the other people that Exalt should be introduced to. And long story short, after COVID, when I developed like another strategy, he says, this is remarkable. I'm gonna fly in, spend more time with you. And the same process occurred, brought in his entire trustee. And I had a proposal of $2 million. And within an hour, they approved it. And yeah, and then from there, it's now, how can we support an education and a national framework? So I would say that because it was intentional, deliberate, and slow, at the point in time that we're going to scale for a bigger impact, they know what we are able to offer. And I also think that they began to see like what are our challenges and how can they either meet those gaps or introduce us to other people. And it has been wonderful because it's the perfect model, right? It's like the perfect model of having someone who could start with a small, that's not a small grant, but could start with that level of grant and then think through long term, which is sustainability for an organization.
And I think, to add to your point, when we are operating from a place of fear and scarcity, we say yes to money. We probably shouldn't because we believe that no more is going to come.
Yes.
And instead, if we're actually able to your point, stand so strongly in our belief system and our value system and say no to money that does not align, we say yes to other money.
Oh, yes, you do.
Erica?
So I'm just going to ground that thought in a different perspective, which is sometimes you got to say yes to that money that you're like, I really don't want, because you might not have the benefit of the surplus or other funders to go to. So there's a reality to this.
True.
I agree with everything that has been said, but I also just want to acknowledge the fact that sometimes even your no, maybe you're accepting the money now, and in your mind, in 2 years, I'm not taking this damn money from you. I just want to
Yes, agreed.
just assert that bit. The other thing I'll just say that I increasingly see, especially in the seat I sit in now, because I work a lot with foundations and grant makers. So this game is about impact, but it's also about nepotism and relationships, right? There is so much power in a funder going to another funder, more so than us going to funders. It is mind-blowing when you see it. And sometimes you see speed, like you talked about, like you were able to do it in an hour. I've seen that happen between two funders in 6 and 7 digit gifts on a 1 hour Zoom, where I'm like, wait a minute, did you just get that other funder to match your $1 million gift? What just happened? And so I say that to say, I think one thing I would definitely encourage us all to do more is for the funders that you have identified who you think of as partners, like these are people actually I trust. Not only do I respect how they grant make, but I've come to actually really like these people, is reaching out to ask for help more than we do now. I find so many funders are literally, not all of them, but so many of them are literally in a space of, okay, what can we do beyond the check? So they have the desire, but they don't have the clarity on the need, and they don't have the short list of who should I focus on. And so by asking, and at least, like you're not asking in a way where you're dependent, but you're at least planting a seed in their minds of here are some things we're working on that we might be having trouble with, whether it's connecting to a specific funder or specific initiatives you're trying to invest. Even outside, one thing I'll say that's been interesting is sometimes even outside of grant making priorities. So I've seen funders like get really excited going back to succession planning when a leader tells them, I think my time is up. And I think I got 1 more year in the seat. I've seen funders step up and be like, okay, you need a grant for a search firm? You need a grant for a coach for transition? That's not part of your mission statement, but somehow funds are available. But I just want to put that out there just as a reiteration. Like, I think one of the best quotes I've ever heard from a woman leader like 20 years ago was just don't ask, don't get. So my idea in life is, it's not my job to say no to myself. If you're somebody I trust, I'm going to at least make the ask. The worst thing you're going to say is no.
Yeah.
That's not so bad.
Let's talk about the role that you play relative to the larger community. And so I think the job of an ED or CEO is really freaking hard. And there's so much that not only are you doing, but so many expectations that are put on you by other people, whether it's your board, whether it's funders, whether it's the community. So I guess the question is, how do you hold on to yourself when the narrative isn't your narrative? Is this an impossible task?
Yes and no. It's understanding life cycles, that this is like a temporary, hopefully, process, that you are in this role, knowing that you're going to change and to shift and to evolve. I was experiencing this not too long ago when I was able to recognize, wow, I grew this organization and we're going to go through this process again. And then the expectations are higher. Something else that I began to experience early on. I remember when it was recognized that I was the first Latina running a juvenile justice organization, the pressure that I had that you just can't fail. When I was like the first woman of color leading, I didn't know that was a pressure point and a real one, that I was representing so many people that I never knew that I was representing. And then now that I get to see so many women of color leading, I think that the responsibility becomes, it feels like different. And these are expectations that at no point are written in your job description. At no point do you know what you really are walking into. And I will start to transition with this. It's this deep question is like, how much are we pursuing excellence? And how are we passing on what we have learned to another group of people? Your question wasn't that, but I think that as an organization that at one point was not so visible and now it is, it comes with different pressure points that, you know, like once I was like, oh, I didn't know I signed up for that. I did. I actually did by being a women leader.
I'm going to go back to actually Erica's North Star. My why is really clear in my mind. And at some point that becomes my superpower, because there's all this noise around you and other people who say, but you should do this, or you're good at that. Thank you, or maybe, but it's got to really sit here. And when I'm clear on that, I'm good. It might be a yes, it might be a no, but it makes sense. So, for example, it matters to me that I have younger people on my team that I hope are actually developing into awesome people and awesome professionals. So that word here and there, that way to include them in a meeting they have no business being in. All of those other things, it's like, that's not going to show up in PACE metrics, but it's an extension of youth development at some level. But that matters to me. I think that's important. I got a zillion mentees, and I love that. It's not in my job description, but I feel like it strengthens the community, and it's good. And I guess I've gone through all those phases, like I need to say no more often. And you know what? I keep coming back. I love yes. Yes is cool. I got so much to learn, and there's all these amazing people out there. I always learn something when I've met somebody new, and that really powers me, which actually is bizarrely selfish. I go back to, there's a lot of people who want to define what your success looks like, and I think coming back to how you see it is really powerful. So one other thing I would say, I don't think we talk enough about that, and I say this to this group because this is why we're all actually here. This is a very generous group, and I think that part of being a great leader is being generous. It comes back to you so many zillions of times, and part of the reason, I've talked to Eric about this since I first got involved, you're like, this is so awesome. The number of times that one of you has stepped up to say, yeah, I can help on that, or I do know the perfect person for this, or that, I consider this somewhat uniquely women-centered, actually, that idea that if I give, it'll strengthen all of us, and if we're strengthening all of us, we're strengthening me and my purpose. That builds something really powerful. So that whole idea of working with community is it's just not a burden. It's the community is what's fulfilling and is allowed to lift up and help me be successful in the ways that I think I can be successful.
The way I try to think of it as, in my leadership, my ultimate goal is to never have regrets about how I've led. I can make mistakes. I'm not brilliant, I don't know everything, whatever. But to never have a moment where, with the set of information I had in front of me, I chose the decision that didn't reflect the legacy I'm trying to build and the values I hold, even if I'm the only one holding that point of view on how we should move. I can't have the regret. So that's number one. The second thing that's important for me, and it is personified in this group, which is so beautiful, is I'm a creature who I crave the comfort of community. So the thing I say to people is, I'm a person, I always keep Gales to my Oprah, meaning I'm a pretty strong personality in terms of, and especially as a Black woman, the package I come in, people don't always feel comfortable being direct or being like, girl, that idea not good. That idea not good. And so when I find those people who do that, and like Lisa Holton, Melissa sitting on this couch, or a couple of examples, but when I find people who do that, I tend to keep them close, because in those moments when I'm like super clear, I still want to have a space I can go where even people like this community represents to just sanity check myself and make sure that my Oprah moment is not making me blind or deaf to something that I should be missing. And so that's the other thing I'll just say. If you're that person who benefit from getting opinions from people you trust, make sure you keep those people close and reach out often, because often it'll certify what you're going to do and make you more confident and also able to withstand whatever happens as a result of whatever it is you do or the decision you make, and not in a way that makes you stand in a sense of failure or extreme doubt of imposter. It's like, okay, I made a mistake, I'm gonna learn from that, and I gotta keep going. Pick yourself up faster.
So much wisdom, ladies. All right, last question in the last 2 minutes that we have.
Yes.
What is the one thing that you wish you had known before you took on this job?
Yeah, everything that's broken or every gap that exists is not mine to fill.
Yeah. I'm gonna add mine. Not my circus, not my monkeys.
I love that one.
That being told no, like someone saying no to me, it's okay.
Yeah.
It turns out I'm quite a risk taker, which I didn't think I was. And assessing my own sense of risk, and then pulling my team in to be like, this is not a risk if I ask you to do this. It doesn't work out, it's on me.
It's on
and
me.
I'm good with that. I am so happy being wrong.
Yeah.
And I've learned something. And it's amazing. I didn't know that was a thing until I got some things wrong, but I also realized how powerful it is in a leadership role to take other people's risk aversion away. That's something to hold them back.
Ladies, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
We have a little activité for you. What we would like to do is for you to pot up and say 3 or 4. There are 3 questions we'd love for you to answer. Number 1, what is one big takeaway for you? Number 2, actually I'm just going to give you 2. What's one takeaway? And then the second is, what's one thing you might try to do differently as a result of this conversation? Sound good?